Hey guys, this is ADWCTA, and you are watching our first Hades video. This is now a Hades channel. I'm kidding, we're still a Hearthstone channel. But we will put out at least 3 videos about Hades. They may not all be as long as this one. They will hopefully not be as long as this one because I think there's a lot of content to unpack here. But we will really dig in because I have created an algorithm finding all the fundamentals of Hades, and I want to share some of the results with you guys. If you don't know what Hades is, stop, Google it, then go buy it, and then go play it. Because it is Game of the Year 2020. It's won Game of the Year. It's like it actually has won Game of the Year and quite a few publications. Although not all of them, and I missed some of the big ones. But I just like it's so hands down the Game of the Year 2020 for me that it's hard for me to believe that another game was as good. Like just from a game flow kind of perspective, right? Like not the flashiest graphics necessarily, but it looks very nice. It runs very smoothly, and the gameplay loop, you just feel good playing. Around the house, we call it the crack, and I've put over 200 hours into this since I bought the game, like around Thanksgiving. I think the week before Thanksgiving, and I've spent a number of all-nighters or almost all-nighters just playing this game, like one more run. It's just such an excellent game. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, go buy the game, play it. It doesn't matter who you are. Like I can't think of a person who wouldn't at least enjoy the first, I don't know, 20 to 30 hours of this game. Question mark whether you'll enjoy the super end game that we're going to talk about here, because as you know, this is a channel that goes pretty deep into stuff. We have mathematical models, we have algorithms, we just analyze strategy games really deeply, in particular Hearthstone, but we're doing the same thing or I'm doing the same thing. I keep saying we, because this channel is me and Merps, but Merps hasn't played Hades yet. He will. He definitely will. But just not yet. So I'm taking a head start on this whole thing, and yeah. So if I ever say we, it just is me. I'm not like talking about the royal we. Okay, so the Pact of Punishment, if you guys aren't familiar with Hades, is actually kind of an end game thing. You have to first beat the game once before it opens up, and it's really a bunch of difficulty modifiers that you can tweak. And each time you add more stuff from the Pact of Punishment in, you get higher amounts of heat. You get some rewards for it in the beginning, but eventually at some point you just stop getting rewards for it, and it just becomes kind of like almost a high score system. Like how much punishment can you take and still finish a run? Which, you know, you can see me get excited about it because this is perfect. Like for me, this just means like, well, how good am I at the game, right? I can now measure exactly how good I am at the game. How much heat can I do? And I am definitely not the best player in Hades. So if you're watching this and you're thinking, who is ADWCTA? Is he like, you know, speedrunner, the person who got 60 heat in Hades? No. 2 days ago, I completed 32 heat, which is the last thing in the game that the game actually acknowledges that you do. So I've beaten the game as far as how hard you can make the game and have the game still acknowledge it, besides like just, you know, a number increasing. And then today, earlier, I did my next run after my 32 heat clear, and I cleared 37 heat. So I'm clearly not capped out. I'm pretty sure I could do over 40 heat. My goal is to hit 50 heat. I'm not 100% sure I could do it. So as far as a player goes, I am not the best player, but I'm a pretty damn good player. I bet a lot of players can't get to 32 heat. And more importantly, I'm pretty good, I think, at analyzing stuff. So that's what I'm going to do. And if you don't know who I am or what this channel is, we are, well first, before we get to what we are and what we do, like I talk a lot, and this is going to be long. And if you are only interested in the tier list and the explanation of specific places and why I put them in different places, go to that. At a certain point in the video, my face will shrink to a corner over here. You will see the Pact of Punishment, and I will start talking about the tier list. Then a tier list is going to pop up here. Like, just go to that place in the video. But otherwise, if you want the full context of everything, oh, my camera. This is also going to be unedited. So, unfortunately, if stuff like this happens where everything just kind of gets fuzzy, I don't know what's wrong with my camera on this, but we're just gonna have to go with it. So hopefully my camera corrects itself. Actually, hold on. I'll fix my camera. This is so unprofessional, but I can't keep. I've already restarted this a couple times, so I can't keep restarting this thing. So okay, there we go. That seems to fix it. All right. So yeah, so skip ahead if you don't want any of the talk in the context. I'm going to talk a little bit about what I did to get to my numbers that I'm about to present, and also just kind of who I am. So if you don't know who I am, I'm a top Hearthstone Arena player. I've hit top 200 on the Hearthstone Battlegrounds leaderboards as well. I've been streaming for over 6 years on Hearthstone, and that's mostly what people know me for. Together with Merps and ZD Man, we created an algorithm that kind of evaluates cards, and we evaluate them even before they are released. And we've made many predictions in the past where we're just like, this card that everyone thinks is good is actually not good, or this card that everyone thinks is bad is actually pretty damn great. And we have a really high rate of accuracy, not perfect. Sometimes we're wrong, and then we fix the algorithm, and then the next time it'll be fine. But Blizzard gets us now and then. But overall, I've been doing that for so many years now, and I've been just doing so much thinking on all sorts of game mechanics, fundamentals, and mathematical modeling of these kinds of things. That I feel, and it's just something I like to do. I'll do it for single player games. The last one I did it for was Fire Emblem Three Fates. And that was all over the place. That game is not balanced. They did not even try. Hades comes out a lot better. For a single player game, actually, Hades is very well balanced. Just, I don't know if it's because they were in like early access for such a long period and they were able to tweak all the numbers, or if they just have a really good mathematical model behind it. But overall, for a single player game, this is about as tight as I've seen in terms of the balance. That doesn't mean that there aren't issues in it. In addition to the Hearthstone stuff, I've also been on the other side of the table. I've been a game designer, the lead balance designer of a card game called Gods Unchained for its first year of existence. It's a Ethereum cryptocurrency card game. If you Google it, they're still ongoing. They got MTGA's director on board and became a much more structured setup, and because I work on this part-time, I couldn't kind of keep up and continue in my role there. But for about a year, I was creating cards and I was balancing them, and I was on the dev side of things, being able to see how they interacted, what issues there are in the design process and all that. So I have both sides of the experience, although definitely more as an analyzer than a developer. But still, I think among the people who are streaming out there, I have one of the wider views of the whole balancing process. Okay, anything else I want to talk about before we go on into the tier list? Right. Okay. So I'm also not just a card game player. I've played and ranked in the top 1% or 2% of games like StarCraft, Overwatch. If you are a Civilization 5 fanatic and you used to be on the Civ 5 forums in civfanatics.com, I wrote a couple guides there and I kept the tier list for that. I think that was the first time where I like made a tier list and tried to keep it up and tried to like do math things to it. And that's what really got me addicted to all the stuff that came afterwards. But that was like 8 years ago or something. It was a long time ago. Anyway, one of the things I'd really like to do is to take these kinds of games, like Hades included, that are that require like hand-eye coordination and like timing and aim and APM. You know, I talk about StarCraft and Overwatch. It's these kinds of things that I really suck at. Like I was a top league, like when the StarCraft came out, it was like the top league was Diamond, I think, at the time. And I was middle of Diamond League with an APM of under 30, which is absurdly low for a StarCraft player. But that's what I did. And I made my own strategy that no one else was running. And I did that, right? Like for Overwatch, I was a Masters League, playing tank. So not a super mechanically heavy class, but playing main tank, Orisa and Reinhardt. But I was able to do it despite having, like, frankly, just terrible aim. Like, if I move the mouse too much, I get dizzy. I have motion sickness. And I just try to compensate for all of this stuff. And I really enjoy compensating for all of this stuff with kind of preparation, understanding of the meta, and just doing a lot of math beforehand. Like, it feels weird, but if you model everything, then you go in a much better position than everyone else. I'm going to begin streaming Hades on Tuesday nights, and you'll see, I suck. I should not be able to do like 30 heat clears, much less 40 heat clears. But I end up doing it because of what I'm about to present to you. Like, if you just keep a lot of knowledge in your head and really analyze it and absorb it, you can make these decisions faster and smarter than other people. So on to the Hades algorithm. What I did with the Hades algorithm is I kind of backwards engineered how I think their mathematical model works. So the unit that I use, and you're going to see a lot, is a capital B, and I'm going to call it a boon. And what it is it's the average value of a rare boon that does not take up a slot. It's kind of a technical thing, but I couldn't, like, there was no, I didn't have a good unit of measurement, right? This isn't like Hearthstone where it's like one stat, right? Or like a Yeti. So I picked rare boon as my center point. And because everything's relative in all games, you always need a center point. And then I took the game, broke it down to its fundamentals, what attacks are worth, what attack speed is, how they interact with each other, stretch that out to what damage is, what about base damage, percent damage onto special versus attack, what casts are, aid, all sorts of stuff. I worked everything in, got dodge, crit, blah, 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 blah. It took a long time. But this is stuff I enjoy. So after backwards engineering everything, I then forwards engineered, and I got a bunch of values for all the stuff that goes on over the course of the game. There are some assumptions in there, and I'll point out my assumptions as I make them for my evaluation of the Pact of Punishment. And overall, when it comes to boons, there's a few exceptions, but I feel like those exceptions are obvious and people know them. The ones that, and there's always like a good 5% at least, if not more, of stuff that you just can't value because they're very unique effects. Like, I can scale things off attack speed and damage and, like, healing and all sorts of other stuff. All sorts of RNG stuff, all very scalable, very easy to math. But then if you go ahead and do something like projectile movement is slowed down by 50%, right? Like when I was trying to value aspect of Arthur for the sword, I'm like, there's a dual boon that kind of does the same thing. I'm just going to assume that the dual boon is valued correctly and go off that. That's all I could do because I couldn't. There's not a lot of projectile interaction, right? In this game that I can kind of go off of. Anyway, overall, after doing all of it, things were within like a 25% range. Almost everything in the game is within a 25% range. In fact, you'll see that even in this Pact of Punishment, as I split into my tier list, the lowest one, well, not the lowest one, the second to lowest one is more or less 25% below the median. And with two exceptions, the third highest one is within plus 33%, which is divided by 0.75, so it's the reverse of the 25% down, right? You can't go 25% down, 25% up. That's not equal. You have to multiply by 75% to get 25% down, so you have to divide by 75% to get 33% up. So it's within that spectrum, which when we're modeling in Hearthstone, that is my like feel good percentage, right? Like if a Yeti's a 100, a card that's like a 133, that's pretty balanced still. Like it's barely premium, right? Because it's not super powerful. You don't feel insanely powerful playing that card. And similarly, if a Yeti's a 100 and you go down to a 75 rated card, you're not happy about it. You can tell it's worse. This isn't like stuff that will slide by you. Like even if you have no numbers, you'll just feel it. But you don't lose the whole game because you had to play like a 4-4 on turn 4, right? Like you're in a significantly worse spot, but you haven't lost the game. So that's kind of the range of balance that I think is the outer model. And when I was working at Gods Unchained, that's what I tried to do. I try to keep your best, non-legendary cards onto 1.33x and your lowest one onto 0.75x. It's just a general rule I have for balancing. And Hades follows that, like, pretty strictly, pretty impressively, with a couple of outliers that we'll talk. But even within that range, it's a pretty big range, right? Like, if you're talking in Hearthstone terms, you can play, like, I don't know, what's a good card? Water Ellie may be a little too good, but something like a Water Ellie-ish, maybe a little less good than a Water Elemental, or you could play a 4-mana 4/4. And there's a world of difference there, right? But they're both, like, balanced cards. So that's what the tier list is for. Anyway, so the whole algorithm is there, and I'm just talking about the Pact of Punishment now. I have videos set up for, or I have the notes to the videos set up for keepsakes and for weapon aspects afterwards. And if it gets like super popular, I'll go on after that. But it's really like a lot more work after that to be completionist about things. And those are the ones, and if we're talking about boons, they're pretty balanced. There's not much to say about them. And you also don't get to pick them, if you know what I mean. Like, if you get a Poseidon boon, then you get a Poseidon boon. You don't get to say like, oh, I don't want a Poseidon boon, I want a Zeus boon. Sometimes you do, right? Sometimes there's doors that you have Fated Authority that you can do it. So there's some of them, but there's not like that much in terms of choice. Whereas Pact of Punishment is 100% choice, right? You get to pick exactly which punishment you do. Your weapon aspects, you get to pick exactly what you do. Your keepsakes, you get to pick exactly what you do. So these things are ones which the player actually has a lot of control. And so I felt like that would be the most useful to present. Whereas the more outside factors you introduce that happen within a run, the more your average mathematical model, the less it matters, right? Like, who cares if this boon is 1.2 times the value of this other boon? Because I'm in the middle of the run, I already have a bunch of other boons. I know my situation, my life total, how good I am, what interactions are. Like, I'm going to easily come up with 0.2 synergy off stuff. Like, that just blows it out of the water, right? So evaluating boons is kind of like oftentimes evaluating the last couple picks in a draft. Your tier list doesn't really matter at that point. Like, if I created an algorithm that reflected this Hades run as it goes, then it could work. But that's a crap ton of work. I'm not doing that. So anyway, that's why we're presenting this. Yeah. All right. I think we're about to ready to actually get to the meat of this. The meat of this video. We are now almost 20 minutes in. One more thing. This video is not sponsored. Hades is not sponsoring us. Supergiant Games, which made Hades, this excellent game, is not sponsoring us. I know normally when we do videos that are not Hearthstone, it is sponsored content. This is not sponsored content. Nobody's paying me. In full disclosure, Greg Casavin, the creative director of Supergiant Games, actually in 2019, the summer of 2019, I have this email because he emailed me again after seeing my tweet, sent us early access to the game before even early access, and then again when early access came, and was like, hey, he's apparently a longtime listener of the podcast, and I know his name, like, without the connection to Supergiant Games as like a fan of our show before this whole thing even happened, not knowing at all what he did for a living. And he's like, hey, so there's this game, you guys should really play it. I think you'll really like it. It's called Hades, let's here's a key, see how you like it. And then we're like, awesome, we'll do that. And then we got really busy and didn't play it. And then I eventually started playing Hades at the end of November, having no idea that Hades and the game Greg was sending me was the same, until I'm like 200 hours in. I'm like posting stuff on Twitter, and he's like, oh my god, you're playing Hades, this is my game, you remember this? Anyway, just wanted to disclose that. Still, no one's paying us or no one's doing anything, but Greg, if you're watching this, sorry. For what it's worth, this is the first single player PC game that I have played since your email. So it just took me a really long time to get to it, but we did get around to it, and now we're making content for Hades. And you're right, this is like right up my alley, super fun, and I enjoyed every freaking minute of it. And I'm gonna put at least another hour, 100 hours, if not 200,000 hours into this game. I just know it. Okay. Anyway, onward. Now we are going to. I'm gonna see if I can get this right. All right, that's a black screen, so not right, but hopefully close enough to right. Okay, let's see if we can get this actually up. Haha! Hades is up now. All right. So we're going to talk about the Pact of Punishment. Where am I? I am here. As you can see, I did clear 32 heat a couple days ago. I actually cleared 37 heat earlier today. So I sort of know what I'm talking about. And after we go over all the heats and the actual tier list placements of them, I'm actually going to present like a guide of how you should progress your heat, because I know that's a question that a lot of players have. It's like, what should I start with? What should I do? You know, what's the easiest, or you know, what's the best? And then we're going to end with some suggestions that I have for balancing based on my models, and we'll talk about that. Some of the imbalance may be intentional. I wouldn't like just putting my game designer hat on. I wouldn't be surprised if some of these they like, because they're so off that they're just like, we know it's like this, but we like, you know, this heat is low because we really want players to take this heat. And this heat like is actually very crappy in terms of value, because we want this to be like the last thing that players do. So the game developers tend to do that kind of stuff so that they have a little control over the player experience, whereas they give the illusion that the player has the control, because look at this. I can add any heat I want, and I can subtract any heat I want, you know. So it seems like I have a lot of control, but by valuing them differently, you know, there could be control. So anyway, what I'm saying is, when we're doing this tier list of heat, this may all be intentional. I don't think it's all intentional. I think a lot of it they're trying to get to the middle, and either they wanted more round numbers and didn't get it to the middle, or they just like messed up the math somewhere, or I'm messing up the math somewhere. But I'll show the results of my tier list. As you can see from this, we're in hell mode. I just started the game on hell mode because I knew I was eventually going to do hell mode anyway, and I wanted to challenge myself. I could do a whole like 20 minutes on hell mode itself, and what a freaking brilliant idea hell mode is. Like this, it is, in my opinion, a more brilliant idea than 95% of the difficulty scaling stuff that I've seen out there. Like, in fact, this whole difficulty scaling thing is done very well. But I won't. I'll save that for maybe another time. So the big thing you have to know about the Pact of Punishment in Hell mode is that personal liability exists, and you can't uncheck it, right? It's just automatically here. And this is, I still have no idea really what it does. It says your auto defense, brief invulnerability after a burst of damage, is 100% inactive. So I think what happens is if you get hit a lot in a very short span of time, you just like become invulnerable for a little bit. I think that's what it is. And that kind of makes sense, because you don't want to like be at one full health and then die in 1 second, right? No one likes that. And there is actually a move. Hades is a giant beam thing that when you're on hell mode, it hits you once. If you don't react immediately and get out of it, you lose your entire life bar. And it's a terrible design because it's not part of the design. This is just hell mode. They're like, look, you're kind of opting into this. But overall, I'm actually going to start the tier list with personal liability. Because overall, this is not something you care about. This is actually like free heat. This is probably the easiest heat you can get in the entire game. So if your goal is to get the most impressive heat number by the end, you should play hell mode, because you get one pretty much free heat. Like, I didn't value this because I don't have any numbers going to it, but I'm pretty sure this would be the lowest out of all the heats. So we could start there. Let me start actually getting let me get the document up. So we're going to do this in a real getaway. We are going to put it in a Chrome browser. I have a Google Sheet here. Yep. And there's our tier list. And then I'm going to type in the stuff, and it'll show up here. And that's how we're gonna do this. Okay. So first up, the easiest one, and you can see the breakdowns, right? I think the median is about 1.5 boons, 1.5 B. which is the equivalent again of 1.5 rare boons that you get that's not slotted. So your utility boons, and not Hermes. Hermes has better boons, and obviously Chaos has better boons. Okay, so I ranked it mild, medium, hot. You know, like heat. Get it? Chili, hot, spicy, and then punishing and unreasonable. Yeah, you'll notice a gap here, but in between punishing and unreasonable, there is nothing in this game that is 2.5 heat to 3 heat, which is what makes me think everything in unreasonable is not so much an oversight as they just wanted it to be unreasonable. We could talk design philosophy later, but that's where we're at. So the first one, mild, I don't even know what number this is because again, I couldn't number it. Personal liability. That is the first one. We should probably make these fonts smaller. Actually, they're not going to all fit. Or maybe let's just... Some of these names are long. Okay. We will make it so that it crops off. Yeah, all right. So it'll just crop off so you guys will get the idea. All right. So the first one is personal liability. All right. Now, moving on to the next thing. I'm going to go from the top to the bottom and we'll fill them in. So the first one you look at, and it's one that in hell mode you're obligated to take 1 rank of. And this is one of the reasons why hell mode is so interesting to me. It's hard labor. Hard labor increases the damage of enemies. Now, not all damage is damage of enemies, but almost all damage is damage from enemies. So the only damage in the game that is not considered damage from enemies are like traps. So imagine that the game is split into 2 things. One is damage from enemies and one is traps. And then there's other miscellaneous things. There's a weird categorization thing. So you have damage from enemies, you have traps, and then you have, I'm going to call them God's damage. So, and what I mean by God's damage is just the random damage that comes up when you are in Trial of the Gods, and that damage comes. Because the gods themselves are damaging, and I don't think that's included in hard labor, but maybe it is. I haven't played around that much with hard labor. I just know I turned it up for a few runs to try to test it out, and it was hard. And it is hard because mathematically, hard labor is one of the hardest heats. You can tell mathematically it's one of the hardest heats because it's plus 20% per rank, whereas you go down to whereas if you go down from hard labor, all right. I'll have this set up in let's see if I can click back into this. Okay, where if you go down from hard labor to Calisthenics Program, this is 15%, and this is health. Damage, health, they should be the same. They should be valued the same, because the more health you have, the more you can stand up to deal damage. The more damage you have, like, yeah, sure, damage is a little more bursty, so there's like some consideration there, but really not much. These are not like fully aligned. Like hard labor is just a bigger deal than Calisthenics Program because they decided to do 20 and 15. They likely decided to do 20 and 15 because they didn't want to do the correct numbers, which is probably something like 17 and 19 or something, but that's why the gap exists. So hard labor is actually going to, I'm going to see if I can do this right. Hard labor averages out to be 1.9. That means if you take all the ranks of hard labor, you will get 1.9. So hard labor 5, I'm going to say. Hard labor 5 itself is actually even lower. Let's see what hard labor 5 itself is. It's 1.5. So hard labor like 5, the very 5th rank, is only 1.5. Why? Because you have anti-synergies that, I mean, or I guess positive synergies, because these are all negative. So you have positive synergies that have built up by taking the earlier ranks of hard labor. Because all percentages, well, not all percentages when it comes to damage in this game is additive. So that means if you have plus 50% damage and then another plus 50% damage, you don't get 50%, and now you're 1.5, and then you add 50% of that, so you're at 2.25. That's not how it works. Instead, you just 1 plus 0.5 of 1 plus 0.5 of 1. So hard labor, you just get the same incremental damage each one you take, which means as a percentage of how much more difficult you're making things, it actually goes lower and lower. So hard labor 5 is actually 1.5 boons, which is not that bad. Like I said before, 1.5 is like kind of the median. However, the very first rank of hard labor, so I'm going to go with hard labor 1 here, is actually 2.33 boons, which makes it the most punishing of all the heats besides the unreasonable ones. Like, this is the top of the punishing zone. And remember, there are 2 unreasonable ranks here. And if you play this game, you probably know what they are. Like, if you play the high heats, you know what they are. If you watch people who play high heats, you know what they are. They're the ones people don't take. Because they're obviously, like, valued weirdly. But yeah, hard labor 1 is actually one of the most punishing ones you can take. So if you're not playing hell mode, I would never recommend you take it. Like, you should save hard labor to the very end if you're not playing hell mode. If you are playing hell mode, you've already gotten the first one kind of like over with, so the rest are a little better. So they're not as punishing, so it gets moved to hot, right? Like, these are the worse than normal, but you can consider it kind of levels of heat. But again, if you are not in hell mode, save it. This is really rough. All right. The second one is lasting consequences. Lasting consequences reduces the amount you can heal by. One word about how this doesn't affect you is whenever you get a heart, like whenever you increase your max health, with the exception of one item that increases your max health without increasing like health, so you get like more max health, but your health stays the same, so you have to then heal to get up to it, and that's a well item. Every other way you have in the game of increasing your max health also increases your health, so it heals you. Essentially, you have more health to work with, and that never gets decreased. There is nothing in this entire row of Pact of Punishment that will decrease that and make your life harder. So you can heal. There's also something called Stubborn Defiance, which all the top players use, which gives you unlimited death defiances, but only 1 per encounter. And what that means is you can heal using your death defiance. So if you're about to complete an encounter and you have 1 dude left, or you have lava, right? Just like run into the lava until you trigger your death defiance. That heals you back up to whatever, and then go to the next room, and that'll replenish your death defiance. So there's weird ways to heal without actually healing, but lasting consequences comes with enough ranks to bring it down to 0. And that makes it interesting because, as you can imagine, if you can heal for full and now you're only healing for 75%, that's not as good. But to go from 75% to 50%, you're actually losing 1/3 of your healing, not 1/4. And more importantly, like that's a difference, right? 1/3 instead of 1/4, but it's not the hugest difference. But going from 1/3 to losing 1/2 of your remaining healing becomes a pretty damn good big deal. And there's also some breakpoints here as well, where for lasting consequences, even 1 rank of it reduces your mirror healing, which gives you 3 health every time you go to a new room, from 3 to 2. So in hell mode, you just start getting 2 health in every room instead of 3. And the second rank, still at 2. It doesn't go to 1. But the third rank brings it down to 1. So when you're at minus 75%, you also essentially lose health every single room, which adds up. So yeah, the final one gets rid of all of your healing altogether, and so that's a big one. So the first one is actually a pretty mild one. The first one is 1.0. which makes it pretty mild. So we'll call it Lasting 1. Lasting C1. Lasting Cons 1. There we go. The next one is a little harder, a little higher up, and that would be Lasting... can't do that because it copies the thing. Really? All right, I'll type it out again. Lasting Cons 2, so the second rank is up at medium, and I explained why these get worse the more you take them. Then you have the next one, which skips over all of hot. Lasting Cons 3 is so punishing that it goes directly into punishing. And then the final rank of Lasting Cons is so freaking high. So over here it's 2.0, by the way, and here it gets to be 2.66, which pushes it into, oh, you know what? I said unreasonable is 3.0 plus. I'm gonna make it 2.6 plus, 2.5 plus. I forgot this one existed. So okay, so there is something over 2.5 boons. So here is Lasting Cons 4. In practice, I think what people do is they take ranks 1 and then rank 2 kind of over here, and then they don't take 3 until they're ready to take 4. Because once you take 4, you're not healing anyway. You just rely on alternative means of healing, and you switch over to Stubborn Defiance, which makes these two kind of almost free. And that's why you do it that way. But in terms of the math, this is how the math works out. All right. Next up is convenience fee. Convenience fee is gold. Gold is something you know that you can change, like 150 is a boon, right? So you may think, well, if 150 gold is a boon, then shouldn't getting rid of, well, hold on. Okay, so if 150 gold is a boon and 125 gold is a heart, then that's a pretty good marker for how these things are valued in the game. That is unfortunately not the case. This game heavily undervalues us. I guess overvalues gold when they give it to you. So when you're deciding between rooms, right, you're deciding between 100 gold, a heart, which is 25 max health and 25 healing, and a boon. But they're not worth 100 gold, 125 gold, and 150 gold the way they are in Charon's shop. Instead, it takes 200 gold to actually be the equivalent of a rare boon. Not 150. It's some combination of delay and you're needing to actually take the Charon shop. But trust me on the math on this. This was one of the weirder points of how the algorithm worked out. And I really spent a lot of brain damage on this. So just trust me when I say that that's how the gold works out. So one tip is to never take gold rooms. Even if you don't have convenience fee on, like, try your best not to take rooms with gold. It's just like the other ones have to be worth very little. Almost always you would take a heart over gold, first of all. And then the boon has to be real bad and real useless for you to take that over gold. And every now and then you get the option between gold or like some like meta thing, which you would obviously take the gold instead of the resources that don't affect your game at all. Okay, so here, each rank of convenience fee gives you 40 gold. I'm actually going to just put a rank here in each of these so you can, well, I guess these aren't, you can't really see. Okay, so the only one that really matters is actually this convenience fee, fine. So each rank is 40%. You get 2 ranks in there that goes up to 80%. A lot of people, I think, underestimate the value of gold. So the game doesn't give you a lot of gold, so gold rooms are trash, but gold itself is a really valuable resource in the game. And gold is really valuable because every time you spend gold, you're getting something without messing with the algorithm within the game of what chambers you get. This is like very advanced stuff, but hear me out on this. The game does not give you random rooms. You may think they give you random rooms, but they don't. They give you a certain ratio of rooms. There's a random element involved in it, but the algorithm has a thumb on the scale to keep trying to get you to the ratio that they want. And there are 3 types of rooms. The 2 kinds that we're really concerned with is 1, stuff that affects the game, like the particular run, and 2, meta stuff, which is like gems, darkness, stuff that, yeah, when you get gems, you also get 20 gold, right? Like when you get a key, you also get a fated authority or persuasion or whatever. You get like a palm, a random palm, but still a palm whenever you get some nectar. So they're not like totally worthless in the run, but they're considered meta items. The game has certain set ratios in each act, and they will try to get you to that ratio whenever possible. Which means But what is not considered a room where you get stuff are Charon's shop. So if you go into a shop, it doesn't count as you having gotten a meta resource, but it also doesn't count against you as you having already received a boon from somewhere else. And in each Charon's shop, you can usually get 2 items that help the run. It's usually like a heart or like a palm and a boon, or like 2 boons and then something else, right? And also healing potentially. So they're all stuff that help the run. And there are 3 items, of which at least 2 of them are going to help your run. And none of them counts against you, which is really important. So every time you buy something at Charon's shop, you're actually not only buying a thing, but also buying like a half credit for a future door. I'm pretty sure this doesn't apply to the very last Charon shop, but it applies the one in at the end of Elysium, because then this Temple of Styx thing has its own kind of logic and setup. But every shop before that will have this effect. So gold is very, very, very useful. And if you want to be as powerful as you can, saving your gold until the very end is not a particularly great idea. Not just because you can't use the effects until the very end, but also because you're missing out on other stuff. Anyway, that's a long-winded way of saying, like, this is why a boon is actually worth 200 gold. Like, a lot of these things have gone into this algorithm. This algorithm is deep. But gold ends up coming in at the very end of medium. So it's the highest medium one. It comes out a little over 1.4. Convenience F. I'll just write convenience F because each gold comes out to be worth the same because they're just oh sorry. Do I? Okay, yeah. I'm just gonna put it here. But the first rank is about a little over 1.4. The second rank actually is below 1. So overall, it averages out to somewhere around 1.1, which makes it an okay take. Like, not in the mild category, but definitely on the low end of the medium category. But you have to take both ranks. Which, I've read stuff about this, and people seem to always want to just take one rank because it feels better, right? But the second rank is really where you get your benefits. So if you're going to take one rank of this, and again, it's, you know, even at 1.4, it's totally doable. If you're going to take one rank of it because you just, like, for example, if you just really like to save your gold to the end anyway, then this is not a big problem, right? But if you actually want to take advantage of what gold is doing for your run, gold does a lot for your run. It's why when I was doing my first 32 runs, I made sure I didn't take any of this, even though I personally rank it in medium, and there's not 32 ranks in mild and medium. I still skipped it because it was just so valuable to me to be able to use the shop. And also, I get hurt a lot. Like, I make a lot of mistakes, so I need to heal up. So that's a personal thing. But math-wise, this is kind of where gold is. It averages out to 1.1, but the first rank is 1.4. So the first rank puts you at the high end of that. All right. Next up is Jury Summons. Jury Summons gives you 20% more enemies. It actually increases the amount of enemies that's in a room at one time. So it doesn't just like give you another wave at the end of it. It makes the room more crowded. And that's going to have a lot of different effects based on what weapon you're using and based on whether you have AoE or not. If you use something with AoE, then yeah, having more enemies is kind of good, right? Like, even if it's not good, it's fine. You're just dealing extra damage. You're synergizing with it. On the other hand, if you're using something like the very popular like aspect of Charon for the bow, where you just deal single target damage, it's kind of crappy. Like, you'll have to literally kill 20% more people, and you have less space to maneuver around in. But even in that case, this is just such a low number. Like, math-wise, it barely works out. So all 3 of these ranks, when averaged together, is about 1 boon per. The first one is only 1.1. So these are definitely mild. And it's something that, even if you're playing Bow of Charon or some other purely single target damage, like, I don't know, I guess Fist is mostly single target, but even if you're doing that, I would suggest you turn this on at some point. I also talk about in the guide how you should pick your heats more. But overall, just know that this is one of the easier heats. Okay. Next up, we have Extreme Measures. Extreme Measures makes the boss harder. I'm sure you've tried it. If you've played it, it's one of the first heats anyone recommends that you take, and it's for a good reason. Extreme Measures is pretty easy. Extreme Measures is... I'm going to put them here. Extreme Measures 1 and Extreme Measures 2, super easy. Extreme Measures 3, still pretty easy. But a bit harder in difficulty. So I actually mapped these out based on what the extra thing that they're doing for each of these are. And this is not working off any assumptions. These have actually been mapped out. It took me a while, but I was really curious where these fell and if I was like really underestimating or overestimating any of these. And the community generally isn't. Like EM1, EM2 are one of the easiest heats you can take, and EM3 is a step up, but still like EM3 is 1.33. It's actually a little above 1.33. I call it 1.33. It's probably like 1.35 or 6 or something. And it also has the weird effect of making the Asterius mini boss harder because that tracks with EM3 rather than with middle management, normally the mini boss heat. So it gets a little messy. But overall, it's definitely below 1.4. Is where we're at for EM3. I know the first time that I did EM3, I died. It took me a while to get used to EM3. But after I got used to EM3, it was not that much harder of a fight. And now I always keep EM3 on. In fact, if you're a ranged build, EM3 is actually probably easier than not having EM3 because people spend a lot more time not chasing you down and doing their own thing. And if you're a ranged build, that's what you want. If you're a melee build, it difficulty ranks up a bit. But still, overall, EM3 is over here. Now, EM4, I did not map out fully because it is really freaking hard. If you know what EM4 does, it is really freaking hard to map that thing. So I am doing EM4 as an assumption. This is like, don't take EM4 with any kind of like, oh, I trust ADWCTA's algorithms, so clearly, this is here. But we are putting this here. I think it's about a 2.0. It may be a little bit higher. I think they mean for it to be a 2.0, if that makes any sense. And maybe they messed up and made it higher than it actually is. And I could see some nerfs coming to EM4. In fact, that's going to be one of my recommendations when I do recommendations, is that I would recommend EM4 be taken down a notch. But I'm going to call it here. This is a little iffy. Okay. Next up is Calisthenics Program. We went over this. This is HP. Everything has more health. Very easy to math. Again, this is 15. Hard labor's 20%. Why? That's such a big gap. That's a 25% gap. That's the widest gap that there can be and still stay balanced. And we know that Hard Labor 1 was in the punishing category. Well, so is actually Calisthenics Program. But the second rank of Calisthenics Program is lower. It's not much lower. It's 1.75. But you can't take 2 without 1, right? So they kind of average out to, I guess, 1.875, which I guess technically puts the whole thing in hot rather than punishing. But it is one of the harder ones. It's similar to hard labor. So looking at this, you don't think it's off. But I think that both Calisthenics Program and hard labor should go by the same rate, and so hard labor should be split into 6 ranks actually instead of 5. But that's just me being OCD about things. It's really fine. Like, I'm not too concerned about this kind of stuff. All right, next up we have benefits package. I did math everything in benefits package to the best of my ability. It's a lot of stuff. So benefits package gives all armored stuff an extra ability. Some of these extra abilities are really good. Some of them are really bad. So a lot of these are like, it can gain essentially the forced overtime speed bonus. Those are really annoying because it also stacks on top of forced overtime. It can also gain the hard labor bonus, and those stack on top of hard labor. Or it can do something totally random, like linker, like creates a link between all the armored stuff and sometimes the unarmored stuff too. And if the link line, like you draw a line between the two enemies and it like glows and it's a laser, and then if it touches you, you get hurt a bit. And some of them teleport, and the teleporting ones, depending on which minion they come on, are either like really annoying or they're not annoying at all. The teleporting one, I did not algorithm, by the way. I just assumed it was the average of what all the other ones are. So overall, benefits package, I know a lot of people recommend taking this, but it's actually kind of hard. Like, I've seen people recommend benefits package as if it's mild or at least medium. But at 1.8, it's pretty squarely in the hot. And that's just the first rank of benefits package. The second rank of benefits package, you get 3 heat from. So the first rank of benefits package, you get 2 heats from. The second rank of benefits package, you actually get 3 heat from. But it actually is even worse because you're now stacking another ability on top of something that already has an ability, and they're all multiplicative instead of additive. So for example, if I'm a dude and I now, because of benefits package, hit 1 plus 100% harder, right? I got that bonus. Well, now I'm adding another bonus, and let's say it makes me faster. Well, now the harder hit thing is faster. So you gotta incorporate that into it as well. So it's not like hugely big of a difference. So benefits pack 1 is 1.8, benefits pack 2 is 2.0. And when I say boons, I've already divided them by the amount of heat they get, by the way. I don't know if that was clear from the beginning. So for example, EM3, you get 3 heat from it. EM3 is not just 1.33 or like 1.4, we'll say. It's not just 1.4 boons. It's 3 times that, right? But you're getting 3 heat for it, so it pays off. This is just a tier list of how you're taking them. So anyway, benefits package is one of the ones that I think people don't quite appreciate how hard even the very first rank makes it. And I think it gets, because it stacks on top of everything. Like, armored units are one of the hardest units to deal with in the game. And it also stacks on top of mini bosses, and armored units come back in the Hades fight. Like, it's just kind of all over the place. And the amount of difficulty and just the random health that you lose because of it, it really adds up. And it adds up even more because it scales with like hard labor and like Calisthenics Program. Overall, it's something I would definitely, like, I know I put benefits pack 1 at hot, but I kind of treat it as punishing. I do take it sometimes in my runs when I need extra heat. But you do have to be quick on your feet also. Like, you have to immediately like identify the minion, right? Like, and what benefit it has before it hits you, because you don't want to be hit every time one of these things happens. And then there are also some just RNG combinations that are freaking hard to deal with even 1 benefits pack. With 2 benefits packs, that's just going to happen so often. I have yet to do a run successfully with full benefits pack on. Okay. So next one is middle management. Middle management makes your mini bosses harder. It makes it harder. Like, most mini bosses, it just like doubles the amount of stuff that's out there. So if there was like 2 mini boss enemies that like are armored and do stuff, now there's 4. Some of them add an extra unit. Like, some of them give the mini bosses an extra move. It's not that bad. Mini bosses are skippable for the most part. Like, the mini boss chambers in Temple of Styx are, I think, oftentimes easier than the regular ones, and sometimes the mini boss chambers are actually just easier depending on what build you have, and they're also skippable half the time. And the Asterius mini boss challenge isn't even included in benefits package. So anyway, this ends up being 1.33. So middle management comes here. It's something I recommend you take, like, around where EM3 is taken. It's something you should get used to anyway. So not much to say about that. Underworld Customs. We have finally gotten to Underworld Customs. Underworld Customs is the lowest heat that I mathed. Because remember, personal liability I think is lower, but I couldn't math it because I don't know what the hell it does mathematically. But Underworld Customs is very clear what it does. And what it does is it forces you to sell something at the end of your first three biomes, your first three acts. Now, when you sell it, you get the gold back. So if you sell a common boon, you'll usually get a little under 50 gold. If you sell a rare boon, you'll get a little under 100. If you sell a epic one, you'll get a little under 150. And if you sell a legendary or dual one, you get like, I don't know, like 400, 500, some like insane amount. I sell a lot of legendary and dual boons. So if you go through the entire game and you just don't sell any of your boons right now, you're doing it wrong. There's a reason you're allowed to sell your boons. One, sometimes gold is more important. That's the most obvious reason. Two, earlier on in the game, by selling boons for gods you don't want, you can more direct the RNG of the chambers to give you like boons from gods that you do want. So if let's say you're being driven down this like Poseidon path, for example, this happens a lot with Poseidon because Poseidon is just a lot of Poseidon boons don't do anything because they're meta related and they give you resources that have nothing to do with this run. So he's one of the, like, I really like Poseidon when I get him going, but usually if I can help it, I try to avoid Poseidon in the early going. So if you have like 2 boons from Poseidon and then 1 boon from like a couple of other gods by the end of the first act, even though a Poseidon boon may be perfectly fine, you may want to sell a Poseidon boon. So then the game doesn't think that you're already going down Poseidon and is giving you more Poseidon boons. On the other hand, and I don't have this confirmed, but I think there's a reverse effect too, where you can get too many boons of a god and they start like trying to like forcibly diversify you. So oftentimes if I have like a really high number of a boon from a certain god, and then one of them's like a utility boon or something that I don't care too much about, but I still need to get their legendary, I would like sell one of those boons. So there's more chances of it popping up later on, of the god popping up later on. Anyway, that's all to say that remember, a boon you can buy for about 150. So if you're selling an epic boon, you're really just delaying when to get the boon and kind of like swapping for one that maybe you like even better. It's not that, it actually wasn't that hard to math if you think about how this whole system works, right? Because choice bonus is one of the big multipliers in the algorithm. So this is super, super low. Overall, this is worth 2 points. It comes out to be under 0.75. It's 0.725 actually, which means like I think this should be only worth 1 heat, because even at that point it's only like 1.5, which is about average, as you can see from this list. So it does mess up builds a lot, especially in the early going, and it makes you like not want to commit palms as much into stuff. But overall, if you are a smart thinking player and you know this game, this is easiest boon, easiest heat for you to take. Underworld Customs. Like I have it on in every single run that I'm seriously trying to get a higher heat on. I sometimes don't have it on when I'm like still, because I'm still clearing some bounties for some weapons, and sometimes I just want like an insane build for the hell of it for fun, because you know it's like low heat anyway. I know I'm not going to die. I just have to kind of go through the motions, and then I don't want Underworld Customs messing things up. But if I'm serious about like racking up the heat, you got to take Underworld Customs. It's just it's too going with the flow. Now keep in mind, Underworld Customs stacks negatively with convenience fee, because convenience fee makes any gold that you get basically worthless. So like for the people who are really gung-ho about taking convenience fee because, oh, it's a shop, I don't need to use the shop. Well, Underworld Customs is even more worth it, and it makes convenience fee like a harsher penalty because it stacks negatively with convenience fee. Just some food for thought. Okay, next up is forced overtime. If you guys know me at all, you know I'm going to hate something like forced overtime, because forced overtime increases your opponent's attack speed and also their run speed, which means you can't position yourself against them particularly well anymore. It means they turn around faster, so you get less backstab damage, and it means a lot of the stuff that you would normally do, you just can't do anymore. Like, a lot of your normal strategies against random mobs or bosses just don't work anymore. It's especially apparent with Hades, where with double forced overtime on, my positioning has to be farther from Hades normally, like significantly farther, like more than double the distance than it would if I didn't have any forced overtime on. That's because if he starts to try to do the double spin, you see the little circle and you can get out of the way. Well, you can't get out of the way from right next to him anymore, whereas you could before. You have to be like halfway away, which is not a problem with most weapons, but if you're using something like the fist or something, you're really gonna feel it with forced overtime. But if you're using something like the fist, forced overtime doesn't do a lot to harm you before that, so it kind of balances out. Anyway, overall, forced overtime is almost a 1.5, but not quite. It falls just short, and both ranks are the same. I know a lot of people are like, oh, the second rank is so much harder. There are certain breakpoints for certain weapons that the second one hits that the first one doesn't hit, but there are also like breakpoints that the first one hits that the second one doesn't hit. So depending on your playstyle and depending on what weapon aspect and what weapon you use, the second forced overtime may be worth more than the first forced overtime, or the first forced overtime may be worth more than the second forced overtime. I'm not covering all of it. They're generally at the very top of medium, or you can view them as the very bottom of hot. But one thing about forced overtime is it changes the way the entire game is played. And you get 3 ranks. Like, you get 3 heat from each rank, and that's a total of 6. So if you're a high heat player, or you aspire to be a high heat player, at some point you're going to need to take forced overtime. You just can't avoid forced overtime and be a high heat player. And forced overtime messes up all of your timings, all of your muscle memory, because everything's just moving faster. So you'll be like a little bit off every time. So my advice is, and keep in mind, this is coming from me, I hate forced overtime. I hate everything it represents. And in one of my pitches later on for how I would change the heat system is actually that I would change forced overtime to cap at a lower amount than plus 40%. Like, I think it should be plus 33%. Plus 40 is too much. And that's not a random number that I picked out of a hat. It's because the rare boon for Hermes, for running or whatever, run speed, the rare boon is 30%. So you don't want to make it. Like, you fundamentally change the game when you hit 40%, because you now don't even have a way of getting anywhere near the speeds, because it's all relative, right? Anyway, my point being, just for practice, you should turn forced overtime on as early as possible. Seems weird because it's a pretty high-ranking heat source overall, and you should probably avoid it if you want to get higher heats. But if you are aspiring to be a really high heat player, it's just good practice, and you're going to need to take it anyway. And in fact, almost everything you do in terms of muscle memory before you take forced overtime is completely worthless and actively harmful. So if you're on like 10 heat or whatever, 6 heat if you're not on hell mode, and you aspire to one day do 32 heat plus runs, just turn forced overtime on for every one of your runs. Like, that's what I do now. I do not do a single run without forced overtime on, even if I have to go over the bounty limit to do it. I just don't want to mess up my muscle memory. Okay, next is Heightened Security. This one is one that there's people are all over the map on this, but generally people hate it. It's a trap. I get it. Heightened Security increases trap damage by 400%. That's a lot. Your lava, instead of starting ticking at 1, it starts ticking from 5 and then goes up really fast. When you get hit by like a trap in Act 1 in Tartarus, in the very first place, it takes 25 health away from you. If you get hit by one of Hades' vases, it's game over, right? Like, Death Defiance triggered. So it's heavily punishing, and people hate it. But here's the thing with traps. They're like the least RNG thing in this entire game. You know where they are. They never move. They don't chase after you. it's not true. The lava chases after you a little bit, but there's plenty of warning. And overall, I have an assumption here because there's no good way to do this mathematically. And my assumption is based off of my gameplay. And that assumption is that I get hit by one trap per act. Per biome, I get hit by one trap. And if you get hit by, on average, more than one trap per biome, you should probably, I guess if you're, just starting in the game, you can get hit by more traps, and so this is a trap. You shouldn't take it because you'll be killed. But as you get to higher heats, you should not be getting hit by traps. I think I'm getting hit by too many traps, and it's all my fault, and I just got to be more careful. It's a little bit tricky sometimes with auto aim on the controller. By the way, I play on a controller, if you guys are wondering. And the auto aim sometimes makes you dash in a weird direction and you end up in a trap, but it's all stuff you should be able to start anticipating after a while. So it's not something you want to take in the very beginning. But overall, if you get hit by one trap per biome, this ends up being a 1.6. Which means it is the lowest of the hot. So it's not a free heat by any stretch of the imagination. You shouldn't take it early on, but when you're starting to stack up the high heats, you got to take it. It's just not as bad as hard labor or calisthenics. It's not. You're gonna have more health because of it than those. So take it at some point. All right, next up is damage control. Damage control comes up on medium, barely. Damage control. The first one is 1.33. The second one's 1.1. So they both fall within medium. But just know, because people sometimes look at damage control and jury summons, because they're the two that basically only really affect normal encounters and doesn't affect any of the bosses, which are the harder parts. They think of them as somewhat interchangeable. Damage control is overall a bit more punishing than jury summons, but you could get really good synergy with damage control, right? Like if you're fists, or I always put damage control on when I do shield, because I use Shield of Zeus and that spinning thing, it just hits stuff, right? So there are, if you're rail, especially, rail has really high attack rate, then damage control is really good, to take, because it doesn't do as much. But normally damage control is a little bit more punishing than jury summons. That's just all there is to it. I personally hate it. Just I want to hurt things, hitting things and having them not get hurt. Not my deal. Next is approval process. This one I really, really like. So approval process is over here in hot. People kind of put this one, Approval Pro 1 is over here at hot. And what this one does is it limits your choices. So you normally get 3 choices. Now you only get 2. 2 choices is still a lot. Think of choices as discovers in Hearthstone, right? Discovering among 3 is really good. Discovering among 2 is worse, but you still get a choice, right? You can avoid the really bad things. Most of what you're looking for is to avoid bad things, not really get the best thing. And I'm just borrowing from our Hearthstone algorithm on how discover mechanics work and how drafting in the arena just works at its core. So I'm very sure about this one. It's over here. I know some people who don't want to touch it with a 10-foot stick, and then other people who are like, oh yeah, it's just something that doesn't make enemies harder or anything. It does have an effect. It's in the middle. Approval process 2, I know a lot of people though just won't touch it at all because they feel bad, because that gets rid of your other choice. So you're just forced to take whatever they hand you. But it's actually not that bad. Approval Pro 2 is it's over here. I don't know what else to say about it. This has been mapped out. It's 2.0 boon, so it's on the low end of punishing even. If you're on high heats, take it. I have Approval Pro 2 enabled all the time. It's one of my go-to boons when I'm doing even 32 heat, just because I like rolling with the punches. I'm not about, you know me. I'm not about creating the best synergy build and then like face rolling Hades at the end. I'm about just doing what it takes to get by and then beating Hades with like 10 life left. That's the most efficient run, right? And as you get higher in heats, you're just going to be able to do less and less. They're even going to start taking away your mirror stuff. So approval process, especially before you go on to the mirror item, which I skip, by the way. If you guys are wondering, I skip routine inspection for a reason. Before you start taking the mirror ones, you can even re-roll the ones that are really bad for approval process. And approval process, I don't know if you guys know, if you've never tried it, you probably don't, but it doesn't affect wells. So you can, when you're selling stuff from Underworld Customs, for example, you still have 3 choices. When you're at a well and you're trying to buy your Death Defiances back or some healing or whatever, you still have 3 choices. This affects boons, it affects palms, and it affects hammers. So I just roll with it, right? Like, Jesus take the wheel, RNGesus take the wheel, give me the good stuff. And you know what? If I don't get a good stuff, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to sell it in Underworld Customs, right? Like, that's how I view it. Anyway, that's approval process. And we're almost done with this. Next up is tight deadline. I can't math time. I mean, I can math time, but I would need way more information than I have at my disposal. So this is purely going off of feel. I am going to put tight deadline 1 as mild, because having 9 minutes per biome, even I can do it. And if I can do it, anyone can do it. I'm going to put tight deadline 2 in hot. Some people may view it as medium, but as you're stacking some heat, keep in mind that a lot of the easier heats, like damage control and jury summons, actually increase the length of the game. On the other hand, forced overtime here decreases the length of the game, because forced overtime also makes things spawn faster and also makes them find you faster, so you can like start hitting them more. Also, EM3 does give Theseus 33% more health. Not Asterius for some reason, but it does give Theseus 33% more health. So just a lot of things that you want to take that increases the length of the game. So you could avoid all of those, but that's not worth it for 2 extra heat and tight deadlines too. So I'm putting it in hot. And for tight deadlines 3, I don't know how people do it. I don't. You get 5 minutes per biome. I don't know how people do it. But again, I'm a very slow person. It is unreasonable to me for tight deadline 3. Maybe it's reasonable for people. I've certainly seen people do it. I've watched this guy get like 60 heat in a run with tight deadline enabled, tight deadline 3, and he ended up being like 5 seconds off before he would just lose due to tight deadline 3. And this guy's got to be like super good at the game and stuff, right? So it is possible, even with all this, kind of set up, at least with certain weapons, but it's generally speaking, I think, unreasonable. And you shouldn't try to go for it. Do the other keys. Play the actual game. Don't just try to be fast about it. Okay, now we move on. Like, as you can see, this is all pretty well balanced. Underworld Customs is kind of poorly balanced. But the other ones you can all make some arguments for, right? Like, if it were up to me, I would take everything in mild and make them harder, because it's like a little too easy. But it's even not that bad, right? You're at 1 boon and you're at 1.5 boon. I said minus 25%, so from 1.5, that's our middle line. That minus 25% is 1.125. So you just have to increase it by like a little bit, right? So one of my suggestions would be for jury summons, instead of being plus 20%, to be plus 25%, right? Like stuff like that. And then cap it. So you only have 2 ranks instead of 3, or like whatever, right? Just like little stuff like that would make these a little better in terms of how they're valued. But overall, it's good. If you look at the punishing side, 1.5 times 1.33 gets you to 2.25. What's above 2.25 really? Oh, sorry. 1.5 times 1.33 gets to 2.0. What's above 2.0? Hard labor 1, but that's fine because you have other levels of hard labor that'll even it out to be below 2. Calisthenics is 2.0. lasting consequences, 3 is 2.0. EM4, I have not fully mapped out, but I assume it's 2.0, and maybe, and if you need to tune it down, right, you can always just tune down the difficulty of EM4. Benefits Pack 2 is 2.0, Approval Process 2 is 2.0. So these are all pretty well done, I think, and in line with what we would expect. And now we get to Mirror. The Mirror shuts down 3 ranks at a time. So the first 3 the Mirror shuts down are your like rarity stuff. That's the best way you can take it. It's your Fated Authority, Fated Persuasion, God's Pride, God's Legacy, Olympia Favorite, Dark Foresight. It changes how much stuff you get. So super easy to math, and it's actually not that bad. It comes out here. I'm going to call it Mirror. I understand it's called Routine Inspection, but I always call it Mirror, so I'm just going to say Mirror. So Mirror 1 actually ends up at a 2.0. It's not bad. Mirror 2 also ends up at a 2.25. So it's a little over 2. You don't want to take it before the other stuff, really, but it's also not that bad. It's bad, right? It's an end game kind of like Heat, but it's vaguely almost within reason. And that's the one that gets rid of Privileged Status or Family Favorite. I do Family Favorite over Privileged Status because I like to roll with the punches, and Family Favorite lets you do that way more than Privileged Status. I think most people do Privileged Status. But also I do AP, like 5 ranks of 5 Heat from AP, so I have less say in what I'm actually doing with my build. It has Thick Skin, which is 50 health. It's a significant loss, and then it has Deep Pockets, which is 100 gold. But by this point, you've definitely enabled Convenience Fee to the max, right? If you're looking at taking Mirror ranks, you have Convenience Fee, and so your gold doesn't even matter all that much anymore. So it's not that big of a deal. So that's Mirror, the first 2 ranks. After the first 2 ranks, Mirror starts being pretty damn unreasonable. Mirror 3 is a 3.0. That is way higher than 2.25. Way higher than 2.25. That jump, right? That's a ridiculous jump. Lasting Consequences becomes 2.66. So the last rank of Lasting Consequences, I think it's 2.66. Let me look at it again. Yes, Lasting Consequences is 2.66 at the end. I want to be able to show it somehow. I'm just going to show it down here in the next box. It's not particularly elegant, but I'm kind of committed to this weird way of doing things. Okay. Negative, right? Because that's what parentheses means. Okay. So Lasting Consequences is 2.66. Mirror is 3.0. This is a mirror that does a lot of things. This is the part of the mirror that has your Infernal Soul or Stygian Soul, which is your main way of making your cast do anything. So taking this rank means your cast is like pretty much shut down. Infernal Soul and Stygian Soul it works with Boiling Blood and Abyssal Blood, which is also in the same package. So Infernal Soul, Stygian Soul is how frequently you get your cast, and Boiling Blood and Abyssal Blood is what your cast does. Like one makes you deal more damage, the other one makes enemies slower and deal less damage. So yeah, this one shuts down your cast as a way of doing things. And on top of that, like, that's pretty bad already, right? Because you're losing an option of how to deal with enemies, but it's doable. You don't have to do cast builds. A lot of builds don't have cast doing much, so you're just ending up dealing 50% less damage, which again, you can think of as, I don't know, something similar to a hard labor, right? Or, no, not really hard labor, more like calisthenics, because it effectively increases your opponent's health. But that's all just doable, right? We've seen those. There's nothing like, you see where those are. Those aren't even in punishing, really, or the first rank isn't punishing. These ranks may be in punishing, whatever. But the real kicker is that you are also losing your dash. Greater Reflex and Ruthless Reflex is on here. I am a firm believer that Ruthless Reflex is better than Greater Reflex. I know everybody pretty much disagrees with me, but losing your dash is a pretty big deal. Ruthless Reflex gives you like 50% dodge. Like, that's so much, not to mention 50% attack. And you're dodging stuff all the time, right? Especially when you have forced overtime enabled. Like, every dodge gives you the bonus, pretty much. I mean, every dash gives you the bonus. Or Greater Reflex, having 2 dashes in forced overtime is actually necessary to like actually have you avoid a whole bunch of stuff in the game. So if you don't have Greater Reflex, you need a dash from somewhere else, and you're kind of forced to like try to get one from Hermes, but you can't pick anymore because you're on high heat. It just kind of all doesn't make sense together. So it's a very punishing one to take. Not just shutting down your cast, but also shutting down your dash, and you still only get 2 heat for it. This is the same as Underworld Customs. It's terrible. What I would do here is obviously take that down a notch and make it worth 3 heat at least, right? So then you're at least properly compensating people for taking all this away. Like, I get the idea. You want to try to do a no mirror run and reward that, and you're taking stuff away. But this is a big one. Don't touch this, guys. I don't care if you don't want to do cast builds. Just being able to get your boiling blood or abyssal blood onto a boss it's worth so much. Don't do this till the end. I'd probably enable this before I enable EM4. So maybe we're putting EM4 in the wrong place. But again, Mirror 3 is mapped out. EM4 is not fully mapped out. It's like half mapped out because a lot of things that happen in EM4 are not very easily mapped. So EM4 may be in the unreasonable category too. But I think I would take Mirror 3 over EM4 because I work with 1 dash anyway. That's how I've just been training my play, kind of in anticipation of being able to take this Mirror one. And I could just do a non-cast build and just like lose a lot of damage and stuff. Okay, so finally you have the last rank of Mirror. And this is where things go a little crazy, and this is why this last rank of Mirror, I am 1,000,000% sure the devs know, the game designers know, whoever's in charge of balance of this game, they know that this one is heavily undervalued because it comes in at, and you guys see the numbers, right? They're all 3.0 is the highest one so far. Well, this one's going to come in at a 6.0. So they did not let this slip. No one, like, they're not that bad at balancing. In fact, looking at all this, you kind of get the idea that the whole Hades team for the do balancing, they're pretty good at balancing, right? I mean, it's not the hardest game to balance, but still, they're pretty good about it. And here, clearly, they're not good about it. Oh, Mirror 4, not Mirror 6. Clearly, they're not good about it. You only get 2 ranks for it, and there's about 8 boons of stuff. Sorry, not 8 boons, about 12 boons of stuff that you're losing. 12 boons worth of stuff. And that's because these are your... I mean, it really just comes from one part. So you're losing 3 abilities. So one of the abilities you lose is Chronic Vitality, which, you know, heals you per room. But by the point you're taking this, Chronic Vitality probably does nothing because you've already taken all the last consequences. So you're not really getting healed. You're also losing Shadow Presence and Fury Presence. You're probably taking Shadow Presence, which gives you backstab damage. Again, you can live without backstab damage. Not the end of the world. But what you do lose, and this is the big one, this is by far the biggest get in the entire Mirror. I'll tell you right now, Death Defiance is worth 8 boons. I don't know what Stubborn Defiance is worth. I have not mapped that one out, so I'm just going off Death Defiance. But given that everyone uses Stubborn Defiance in the high heat runs, Stubborn Defiance is probably worth even more, and so that makes the Mirror element worth even more. But I'm calling it at 6 because you can choose Death Defiance, and each one of these ranks, by the way, is given because I'm dealing with fundamentals. They are as if you have not taken any other heat. So none of the heat synergies are built into these rankings because you can take these in whatever order. The only synergies built into these rankings is synergy with itself. If you have to take Hard Labor 1 and 2 before you can take Hard Labor 3, for example, I'm not going to say like I'm not going to say like, oh, hard labor 3 is as if you didn't take hard labor 1 and 2. So all the hard labors are the same. That's not true. You have to take 1 and 2 to get to 3. So 3 is just intrinsically worth like less. That's the only time I would bring synergies in. So I haven't accounted for the fact here that, you know, you're probably not going to get anything for Dark Regeneration, and you want Stubborn Defiance, and, you know, maybe your Death Defiances aren't even worth all that much anymore because you're getting hit for like 1 million damage each one. I don't know. But the point overall is that Death Defiance is worth a lot. Like, a lot. I'm fuzzy again. But Death Defiance is just worth so much. It is worth 8 boons, which means taking it away is so bad. All right, it's so bad. And yeah, this is no accident. I am 100% sure that the Hades team wants Mirror 4 to be the last thing you take, or maybe Tight Deadlines 3, because I really don't know how hard that is when you put other stuff together. And also, so the guy who did the highest heat run on record right now for 60 ended up not taking mirrors 3 or 4, and he definitely needed to not take mirror 3 because he needed the extra dash. Without that, the tight deadlines would not have worked because he only had 5 seconds left in the end. So I think ultimately where we're at with this is tight deadlines is actually the more unreasonable one compared to mirror 3, but tight deadlines gives you 3 and mirror 3 gives you 2, and you can't like splice them out and do, you know, 1 heat for each one. So if you're going to debate between 2 unreasonable ones, and you can do it if you keep mirror 3 like around instead of getting rid of it, and you take tight deadlines, you do it that way instead of the other way around, which is to get rid of that tight deadlines and then also get rid of your mirror, because then you're down 1 heat, right? And you're at 59 heat. So when we get up to that levels, a lot of the things of what's easier or not easier starts having different like impact, right? Because when you get to really high heat, you can already build in the fact that, yes, you have your convenience fee max, you have your lasting consequences max, you have to, right? Or else you're not getting there. So at that point, the math kind of changes, but that's not what this tier list is about. So if you look at this tier list, basically don't take any of the ones that are unreasonable. Let's see how many heat go into each one of these. I have these written out somewhere. So overall, there are 11 mild heats, but this includes hell mode. So 10 if you're not in hell mode. In medium, there are 18 heat. So you're not at 32, but you are at 29. So if your goal is to just kind of get all the bounties, even in hell mode, bounties end at 25, then you don't need to go above medium heat. Now, hot heat goes up 14 heat. Punishing heat goes up another 14 heat. And then unreasonable heat, there is hold up. Not 14, 13. And so the unreasonable one ends up being 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep. So unreasonable ends up having 8 heat. And that's the tier list. This is the full Pact of Punishment tier list. We are at 1 hour and a half. I thought this video was going to be over an hour. I didn't realize it was going to be 2 hours. So this is our Pact of Punishment tier list at the full explanation. Hope you guys enjoyed it. We're now, the video's not ending, mostly because I want to talk about more stuff. Okay. So I'm going to try to make this next part quicker than I normally would have. But I'm going to talk about what heats you should take now. This is how hard heats are. So you may think, well, I should take the easier ones first and then stack on the harder ones. Duh, ADWCTA, what are you talking about? But you would be wrong. Because every time you're playing the game, and when you're doing all of your bounties, it's like very minor increases to the heat, but you still have to do, like, you have to clear each weapon 20 times. That's a lot. That's 120 clears altogether, right? And when you're doing it, you might as well as like make them mean something, right? So part of what you should do when you're doing those clears is you should be doing those clears in a way that fills out your list of prophecies. You should be trying out different builds. You should be trying out your different weapon aspects, right? And seeing which ones you like, blah, 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 blah. But that'll get you maybe 5 runs with each weapon. 6, maybe 10 at most, not 20. So for the later half of it, what you really want to be doing is you want to be training. You want to make yourself actually better at the game, right? Like, why do I play bad arena runs in Hearthstone that like I just like the draft doesn't go my way? I'm not trying to get 12 wins. I'm trying to make myself better at the game by taking the practice of trying to do the most with the crappiest cards. So you should take every single time you play a run in Hades as a chance to get better at the game. Assuming that you care about doing high heats. I will have another segment right after this. Like, so just wait another 5 minutes for this. If all you care about is getting like everything the game has to offer, and you are not going to ever go above 32 heat because that's the last statue, and you are also not going to go above like 20 or 25 heat for the weapons that you're not focused on because that's the last bounties, right? I'll have another section on that. But if you're like me and you want to do high heat, then what you want to do is you want to actually take all the transformational heats first. These are heats that fundamentally change the game. I talked a lot about forced overtime because that is the biggest one. Forced overtime is a transformational heat because it messes up all of your muscle memory, which means everything you do before you take forced overtime, you're kind of like you're getting something out of it, right? You're learning mentally what things do, but you're reacting poorly because you're always reacting slow. And it's not a simple process of just reacting faster. You have to train your muscle memory. So whatever you do, never take forced overtime 1 rank and get that 3 heat. Yes, maybe you're playing a weapon where it's a lot easier to do that than to take the other 3, but you're totally messing your muscle memory up. So in the beginning, when you're just kind of exploring and doing whatever, don't take any forced overtime. Forced overtime is up here in medium. In your early heats, you have plenty of easier heat to take. You know, you have plenty of other stuff to explore. Don't do forced overtime. When you start doing forced overtime, though, like maybe when you're around 10 heat, like I think that's a good time to start doing forced overtime. Maybe around 5 heat if you're not in hell mode. Never leave, right? Because forced overtime will give you 6 heat right there. So take forced overtime, and then everything else you do, even if you're moving on to a different weapon that you don't need 6 heat on, just still take forced overtime both ranks. Because once you start, you want all your muscle memory for the game to be like on the forced overtime level. So tip number 1 is take forced overtime if you want to be good at this game later on, like if you want to do high heat. Other transformational heats that you should really get used to are the extreme measures. You're probably taking the first couple anyway, but if you want to do the very end, you'll probably have to do extreme measures 4, but that's like super end game. It depends on where you want to take it, right? Like I want to take it to like 50 heat, so I probably don't need to do extreme measures 4. So I haven't been training for it, but before I can handle extreme measures 4 on a high heat run, I would have to train with it with like, you know, all the other stuff turned on besides like hard labor and like lasting consequences and convenience fee and that kind of stuff, right? Like just because I need to know what the hell's going on with EM4. And if you think that you're going to be doing EM4 runs, you want to start training with that if possible earlier. I put the cutoff there because I don't think I'm going to get there personally, but I definitely try to put EM 1, 2, 3 on whenever possible to train. The other good thing to train on is Jury 3. Jury Duty is one of the easiest heats, so you kind of want it on anyway. So this is the one time that it really aligns. And you really want Jury 3 because it changes every single room. Like, yeah, it just adds an extra dude or whatever, but it changes all the spacings and everything, and your expectations are changing. So it's just always good to keep Jury 3 on for all times if you're training to be like a really good player. And then Benefits Package. You want to start with Benefits Package, just 1 rank of it, just get used to, one, whenever you see an armor unit, which again, this is really annoying because once you turn on damage control, you no longer can tell what units are armored. So you have to start scanning all the units. So you get into the habit of basically scouting immediately. It's harder with the controller, but still you can do it. You can just rotate your controllers weirdly. And you see what benefits package each of the enemies have. And then you also need to know what the icons actually refer to, and then you need to know how to deal with all the different combinations, right? Each particular enemy type can have one of, I think, 8 different benefits package stuff attached to it. Once you're comfortable with that, then you add your second level of benefits package. I haven't gotten to that point yet, but you need to get to that point because you see where benefits package 2 is. It's in punishing. It's not an unreasonable. Unreasonable, there's 8 heats. There's 64 heats altogether. So if you want to get to 56, you'll need benefits package 2. And I think a lot of people like to take benefits package 2 before taking the mirror ranks. But yeah, generally if you want to do 50 heat plus runs eventually, at some point you're going to have to start familiarizing yourself with 2 ranks of benefits package. But not until super high heat, right? And I feel like this is one you can get used to as you go along. So I haven't been doing it, but I would recommend benefits package 1 rank, even though benefits package 1 rank is hot. That's something to put on after you put on forced overtime and after the EMs. The EMs can actually come and go, right? Because it's just one boss battle. So after you feel like you're good with the boss battle, you can kind of lower it. And there's also some cool dialogue for when you shift back and forth between extreme measures and not extreme measures. So yeah. The last transformational heat is middle management. That's basic. I view middle management the same as EM, the same as extreme measures. It's just extreme measures, but for mini bosses. Until you get to EM4, and then it stacks into EM4 because the guy your final boss starts summoning mini bosses. It gets to be a mess. Okay, anyway, those are your transformational heat. Again, that's your EMs, your forced overtime, your benefits package, your middle management, and your jury duty. So those are the ones that I would go with first. If I was a non-Helmo player, or even if I was a Helmo player, and I want to eventually do 40 heat, 50 heat runs. If you only want to do 40 heat and you don't want to do 50 heat, don't do EM4, don't do BP3, BP2, but do the rest. I think if you even want to ever get to 32 heat, you should probably be training like this, but that's just me. Okay, so that's how I would progress it. The other way to go about it is if you're just look, I just want to do things as easy as possible, and I want to get, the game complete by getting all the bounties, right? Because that's gets your meta going. You can buy all the nice, pretty things for your house. You can. It really goes to the end game after the bounties. Maybe you don't even care about getting the last statue, or you're I'm just going to get really good on one weapon, right? And then that'll be my weapon, and I will get that statue on that weapon. But for everything else, I just want to kind of get it over with. So if you want to do that kind of grind, you also shouldn't necessarily just go by the easiest heat. And that's because if you're grinding for meta stuff, you want to be one of 2 things. You either want it to be the easiest possible, so you don't want any of the heats that stack with each other. The most fun possible. So you don't want random stuff messing up your run, and you want it to be fast. You don't want to do it like me and spend over an hour on each run if you're just kind of grinding through it, right? So what I think you should take, because these are what I think is a balance of relatively easy, but also don't screw with each other and also goes fast or whatever. I think you should always take Underworld Customs 2, just because it's too good a value. You should always take Tight Deadlines 1, because it's just not that hard to get under that deadline, and you should go do it. You take Healing 1, the Lasting Consequences 1, because that's just very good value too, and you barely feel it. Middle Management 2, again, if you just have Middle Management 2 without any of the other ones stacking on top of it, it's not a big deal. You'll barely feel it. And then EM 1, 2, and 3. They are single fights. None of them increase the health except for EM3, which increases Theseus's health by 33%, which is not that much. So they're not going to slow you down. And I don't know, they're kind of enjoyable, I think, the higher level fights. So that's what I would do. And that doesn't get you to 20. So you either have to add one of the following two things. One is what I call the speed package, which is forced overtime 6, and then tight deadlines 2. That gets you your 8 points. Everything goes really fast. You haven't stacked any hard labor. You haven't stacked any jury summons. You haven't stacked any calisthenics. You should be able to just blow through the whole entire thing. Built for speed, right? And keep in mind, I'm not putting any of the convenience fees on, because by the time you get to the end game, you also want to have enough. Like if your run is going fine, right, or if your build has come together or whatever, you want to spend your money and get the Charon's shop like item, get the Titan's blood or the diamond or whatever. Because remember, your goal here in this kind of way is not to be the best player and play the highest heat eventually and train yourself. It's just to get the game done. So why not get more meta stuff? Get the game done faster, right? You're going to need to do a bunch of this stuff. There's not enough bounties for all the Titan's blood that you'll need to be a completionist in the game. So the other way to go about it is, rather than taking forced overtime and tight deadlines, is to take the safe package. This is one I prefer. You take Jury 3. You take Bubble 2. Bubble is... God, I always called it Bubble. It's so weird for me to see the real names on here because I have my pet names for them. But Damage Control 2. And then you take... I would take AP 2, because you just really don't need 3 choices, but that's me. And you take another point on healing. Again, you make sure that here you're just making you the safest possible, and you want to get to the end game with enough money, and you'll be a little slower than the other way, but you will have a better shot of getting enough money. And you'll also be able to potentially, build up more money so that you can, on a more consistent basis, buy that endgame Charon item. All right. That's it for the guide portion. The final thing I want to leave you guys with... Oh, God, this is so long. But we'll get it in under 2 hours. So the final thing I'm going to leave you guys with is my thoughts on balance for Hades. And for the Pact of Punishment. You guys see here I have some problems with how this is balanced on the edges. It's mostly fine. I probably wouldn't touch too much any of the stuff besides the stuff that is in the low end of mild and the stuff in unreasonable. But if you're wondering how me, ADWCTA, as a game designer and a balance designer, would change things up in order to make things more fair, I'll tell you. And Greg, if you're watching this and you've gotten here, I know you're really into this stuff. I don't know if you have anything to do with balance, but if you could pass this on to the other devs in charge of balance or whatever, I would super appreciate it, because I want this game to be the best that it can be, and we're in the early stages of what the end game of Hades is. I think you'll see a lot more dedicated community players try to and succeed at getting some of these high heats. So it's not too late to have a patch to rearrange some of this high heat stuff going on, and it won't affect 99% of the player base, right? This is all end game stuff. I also know stuff like EM4 was added pretty late into the process, so maybe consider some balancing things. All right, anyway, the key thing that I am trying to hold together, and I actually did this with a lot of thought, is I wanted the total number of heats to remain the same. Not only does that make it so that you don't have this big break with pre-patch 2.0 and post-patch 2.0 or whatever, and then all the stuff people did before that doesn't matter anymore. I want to try to avoid that. Maybe put an asterisk on the stuff that happened before it, but the game is launched, right? Your achievements should count. And also, there's a nice progression of the statues, right? 8 heat, 16 heat, 32 heat. There's a total of 64 heat in the game. I like the elegance, so I'm trying to keep it at 64 heat. The second point that I try to make is I try to make sure that nothing goes above 2 heat. I want to cap it at 2 heat. There's going to be a couple ones that actually go a little bit above 2 heat, but two boons, but I want to cap it at 2 boons, because I really believe in the minus 25% plus 33% rule of everything in the middle feels fair and balanced. Stuff that goes past it are starting to become unreasonable. So I'm going to try to bring everything below 1.125 boon up and everything above 2 boons down. And 4, one of the principles I have is I want it to be possible to finish the game with all the heat. Maybe only a handful of players can do it, but right now as it's set up, I think it's literally impossible. And I want to get rid of literal impossibility. I know there's something to be said for just making things as high as possible, letting people mess around with stuff, just knowing that it's not possible. But if you're going for that kind of program, I feel like you would need even more heat, you know? Like, because people are already at 60 heat. That's pretty close to 64, you know what I mean? Like, if you want to have it be an impossible target, then you should allow like 1,000 heat, and the best players should be able to get like 600 heat or something, and then you have a lot of variety in that. But because we're not going off that model, I want 64 heat to be a hittable target. And there's also some other considerations I'll talk about. Okay, so first change I would make, I already said it before, Underworld Customs should be 1 heat. There's no reason it's 2 heat. It's the easiest heat in the game outside of personal liability, and I don't know how to touch personal liability or what, so I'm not touching that. But Underworld Customs should be 1 heat. 2, something should happen with personal liability. Add something to it. I don't care what it is. Just make it a little bit harder. It could be less elegant. It's hell mode anyway. People who pick hell mode aren't exactly looking for elegance, right? Just make it a little bit more punishing. Mostly because it's kind of backwards that in order to get the highest heat runs, you really want to be in hell mode or you're in a disadvantage. Because past a certain point, basically at the point at which you're starting to take hard labor, past that point, hell mode is just a bonus because you get personal liability. And that's weird. So you should at least make personal liability around a 1.5 like kind of heat, instead of right now where it's obviously like a 0.5 or even below kind of heat. So those are the 2 first changes. Okay, now moving on. I'm doing more things. Well, the first thing I'm going to do is kind of like clear out a bunch of heat, right? Because when you take Underworld Customs from 2 heat to 1 heat, you created a heat. I'm going to create a bunch of heats because then I'm going to stuff that heat back into the mirror. Because the mirror you can't really do anything with. You kind of have to have it exist, but it needs more stuff, right, to not be super unreasonable. Okay, so the next one I'm going to clear is jury duty. I want to change jury duty to be 25% instead of 20% and to only have 2 ranks. I don't know what it's adding to the game to have it be 60%. If you want to keep 60%, it would totally be okay to have it be 30% and 30%, right? And it'll still add up to 60%. Again, jury duty is one of the easiest heats. It's not going to go crazy to make it kind of like worth less. So that's something I would do. And then that frees up 1 rank of heat there as well. Then for forced overtime, this one I feel pretty strongly about. I don't know why it's at 40%. I think it skews the entire game a little too much. I want it to be at a max of 33.33%, which makes each rank 16.66%. And then you can make it give only 2 points instead of 3 points of heat, just to kind of keep it on the same balance. That would actually make forced overtime like less efficient per heat. So it'll, on my tier list, it'll probably move forced overtime from medium into hot. But that's okay, because you're capping it out at what I think is a more reasonable amount. Right now, there is now no way, like you can't do anything with boons in order to match the speed that you were at with no boons in the original balanced game. And when it comes to run speed, and this, like my issue with this affects run speed much more than attack speed. In fact, it affects run speed almost exclusively. So your distancing and your positioning gets changed and so skewed when you get past that mark. Like I can handle it if you're like, hey, look, you got to take a Hermes boon, right? Remember my 25%, 33% rule? You got to take a Hermes boon or something to be able to even yourself out, but it's still possible. Into a world where it is actually not possible. That's a pretty big line. And I don't think it's worth it to cross that line just to have 40% over 33.33%. So I want 33.33%. That's how I would do it, and I think it would make the game more fun and more fair. And that would also free up 2 more heats. Next, I want to remove the last rank of lasting consequences. In no other element in this entire Pact of Punishment do you completely eliminate an aspect of the game. And getting rid of lasting consequences completely eliminates heals. It makes a bunch of well items do literally nothing. A bunch of Charon's shop items do literally nothing. Wells, actually, like fountains, just do literally nothing now. Like, it's one thing if you do this and then you make it impossible to recover health, right? So that it's permanent, right? You just start here and you just keep going down. But the game has so many like back doors to just getting health, like whether it's stubborn defiance or it's like just kind of death defiance in general, or it's the hearts in itself. So you have this big disconnect in the game between what lasting consequences should be and what it actually is. So it eliminates a part of the game without getting that hardcore feeling that like everything I do is permanent. It's not permanent. You can gain more health. You have so many ways of gaining more health. So not only is lasting consequence 4 right now just kind of unreasonably like penalizing, like you could change that by making it 2 heat instead of 1 heat, right? And then you'd have an appropriate amount of heat that you get for it. But I just don't like what it does to the game. Eliminating 75% of what healing does is punishing enough. Like, it's super punishing. Like, lasting consequences 3 is under punishing on the boons. It will still be one of the boons that you should not take until the very end. But you shouldn't get rid of all healing. Like, I think it creates an unnecessarily strict and bad element to the game. And it eliminates an aspect of the game that is honestly just part of the game. Like, healing is part of the game. And it actually is still part of the game, even with lasting consequences 4. It's just backdoored in. So it's just weird. It's unnecessary. The game will be much more elegant without that lasting consequences. And you free up 1 heat like that. Finally, I think the timer's too tight. This is just me. But the tight deadlines 3 is kind of insane. When stacked with the other heats, and I'm trying to make it a goal that you can actually finish this game. So I would change tight deadlines to have 4 ranks and to have it be 1, 1, 1, 2, and for each one to just be 1 second less. So 9 seconds, 8 seconds, 7 seconds, 6 seconds. So instead of being 5 seconds per zone, the final one is now 6 seconds per zone, and that'll make it doable. This also frees up 1 more point of heat, which is helpful because it's not as hard. But I think you can preserve what people like to do in terms of being forced to go really, really fast. You create more kind of breakpoints, so people can select the amount of tight deadlines that they want, and you create more things that are incremental, right? One of the issues I have with the Pact of Punishment in general is that it's not as incremental as it could be. Like, not a lot of things are like hard labor or jury duty or whatever. And having tight deadlines be more modular, like 1 heat, 1 heat, 1 heat, 2 heat. I think that'll help it be like used more. Okay, so after those, I have a bunch of other things that I would tweak a little just to kind of make it more fair. Like, for example, calisthenics, I would raise it a little to 16.66, mostly just because that hits the nice 33.33 number when you put 2 ranks into it. I'm OCD, it doesn't make a huge effect in the game. It makes everything have 3% more health, but I would do it. And then gold, the convenience fee, I don't know why it's plus 40%. It just bothers me because it's not like the hardest heat or anything. It could easily be plus 50%. So the 2 of them adds up to be plus 100%. Like, it's a medium heat. Changing it to 50% will make it not even a hot heat. It's probably still a medium heat, but I would do it just to make the numbers look better. It makes the game a little bit harder. I realize a lot of the stuff I did up there kind of made the game a little bit easier here and there. So this is a good way to make the game a little bit harder again, right? But between the calisthenics and the convenience fee. For damage control, I don't know how to make it a little better, but like a little more punishing. But I was thinking maybe that would function the same as armor in terms of knockback. Just add a little something to it. I'm trying to get everything, like all the mild heats, right, to be a little bit more oomph. And with damage control, you can't see if the thing has armor anyway. You know what I mean? So right now you have this weird lack of information between the player and what damage control is doing. And that's not like fun or interesting or necessary. So you might as well just make it all have armor. And then damage control can be like a medium level heat. Okay. The EMs, I think this is intentional on the part of the developers to make EM1 and EM2 very easy. I would make them a little harder. It's pretty easy to make them harder. My suggestion is to make Furies get forced overtime rank 1. Just like give it to them. That'll up the difficulty enough so that EM1 is actually more of a challenge. For EM2, I would up the lava damage. Just make it a little bit harder. Because the whole point of EM2 is that there's now lava everywhere, right? So, I mean, their movesets change a little too, but rather than do anything with that, just upping the lava damage makes it really clear, like, you can't step in the lava. I think that's a fun way to do it without adding more, like, time to it, right? One thing I didn't want to do too much is add more time to it. For EM3, it's probably fine. Maybe I'd give a health bonus to Asterius as well. I think most people kill Asterius first before they kill Theseus, and having EM3 give Theseus more health was kind of unnecessary. But if you're going to do that, if you're going to give Theseus 33% more health, you might as well give... I think Theseus is currently getting 25% more health, but either way, I just want both of them to get 33% more health. And that way, Asterius gets like really hard to kill. So you may actually be incentivized to kill Theseus first, right? It's an interesting dynamic. So that's how I would change the EMs. And EM4 just needs to be toned down. Like, I think it's a little too punishing. One of the things is, why are you taking away the vision? Like, there should be a little better light radius. Like, right now, the circle of what you can see is really quite small. So I would make that a little larger. I changed the way the healing is done. Like, I get it, healing so that you don't, if you try to just drag the game out forever and chip away at it, you don't win like that. But it's a little too punishing right now, I think. So I want the healing total amount to be smaller, but for the healing itself to be quicker. So right now there's this weird thing where to beat EM4, you need a certain amount of DPS, or else he'll just heal faster, right? Like, when he's actually... And if you have a higher amount of DPS, when he's healing, you can actually still damage him down. Like, that's such a weird thing, where, like, when Hades is healing, he's actually dying, right? Like, why? Why make that a possibility? So instead, it should be a very quick move. Like, speed up the animations by a lot. And instead, gain, like, half the amount of healing. Like, speed up the animation by 4x and gain half the healing. Something like that. Also, the summoning speed and frequency of the mini bosses should probably be lowered, or like mixed more, so the ratio of summoning mini bosses versus the ratio of summoning regular mobs is more tilted towards random mobs. I think it's a little too mini boss heavy right now. Just my thoughts on EM4. Okay, so we ended up having 6 heat. We created 6 heat earlier on by moving the Underworld Customs, Jury Duty, Forced Overtime, Lasting Consequences, and Tight Deadline. And with that heat, I want to give it to the Mirror, because the Mirror right now is freaking insane. Like, it's just not being properly incentivized. So the first 2, the ones I have been punishing, I think we could keep there. But the 3rd rank should have 3 heat instead of having 2 heat. And the 4th rank should have 5 heat instead of having 2 heat. So that takes up 4 of the heats. We have 2 heat left. I would make hard labor equal to calisthenics, both of them 16.66 per rank. Hard labor is a little too punishing right now. Calisthenics is, I mean, it's not light, but it would actually make both of them worth about the same, which would be nice. And by changing it to 16.66, obviously for hard labor, you would need one extra heat in there to get it to 100%. And then finally, I would create one new Pact of Punishment. I'll call it Heartburn. I don't really care about the name, but it would be nice, I think, and it would be very elegant to even out your health loss. Because the whole point of lasting consequences is you can't heal, but there are backdoor ways to heal. So I want Heartburn, and also all the things that you buy in the game slowly get worse and worse, right? Like boons, you're able to select less and less stuff. Gold, everything in the shop costs more and more, right? Any healing items you buy, they heal you for less and less. What else can you get? That's kind of it. I think that's all the boons, right? Like you're able to, pawns, you're able to pick fewer and fewer options of where they go. Everything gets worse as you go up a Pact of Punishment. Everything except for the heart. The heart stands out right now, the Centaurian heart, as the only thing in the game that does not get any worse. So I think that should change. I think there should be a 1 heat rank where, call it Heartburn, and it says you only get 25% of health with any increase in maximum health. And this could backwards be applied to the mirror as well, or it could not. I don't really care about that. I just really want to lower what hearts are worth. And this will line up very well with the final level, which is now the 3rd level of lasting consequences. So basically all healing is now reduced 75%. And it becomes very elegant, and you're no longer skewing the game. What I hate that happens when difficulty gets pumped up is the game gets skewed towards certain playstyles. And I think Hades does a pretty good job of not skewing the playstyles. Like, all playstyles are pretty relevant at 32 heat, which I think is what the game is designed for. But as you go up, like, weird things start happening, and they don't have to happen. Like, this is unnecessary, right? This is something that is there because of how the heats are set up. And I think with these changes, you will have a more evened out, more fair, more fun, more incremental end game that as well favors more diverse play styles. Those are just... We have actually hit 2 hours, so I'm wrong. We did not keep this under 2 hours. But those are my suggestions for how I would change the Pact of Punishment. I don't know if you guys like these ideas. Maybe tweet them at Supergiant Games or message them with the idea itself. You don't have to point them at this 2 hour long video. If any of the Hades devs or people still working on the game are watching this or have watched this, please take these into consideration. I don't think they're hugely game changing, and I think they would make the end game much more interesting and fun and balanced, and people can get there with more different weapon aspects. That's it for me. Tier list is up here. I'm going to make a Reddit post about this probably around the same time the video comes out, or like very quickly afterwards, and I will screenshot this or something, so it'll be somewhere that you can refer to without looking into the video. And I may do a short write-up as well. Won't be this whole thing, right? This is a 2 hour long thing. I'm not going to write a novel. There are 2 more videos coming. They're not going to be anywhere near as long as this. I'm going to try to keep those under 1 hour each. And that is weapon aspects and keepsakes, because these are the only things you get to choose, right? You get to choose your Pact of Punishment, you get to choose your weapon, you get to choose your keepsakes. Okay, you also get to choose your mirror. I don't know if I'm going to do a separate video on mirror, but yeah. So these are the things you get to choose, and these are the ones we're going to really dig into deep on evaluations. So keep an eye out if you're interested, and if you made it this far in the video, it's 2 hours in. Hit the like button, subscribe to us if you're interested in Hearthstone, especially. I can't promise that much more Hades content, but there's at least 2 more videos coming out on Hades. And I will be streaming Hades. You can catch me on random weeknights streaming Hades. I think I'm going to try to do Tuesday and Thursday nights. I don't know how long that's going to last for. So it's kind of up in the air, but definitely check out the channel, the Twitch channel, twitch.tv/grinninggoat. Not ADWCTA. If you go to /ADWCTA, it'll send you over to /grinninggoat, which is a channel I do with my friend Merps, who still needs to play Hades. He hasn't yet, but we'll get him. All right. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully I'll see you in the next video. Hopefully you are also a Hades player, and if you're not a Hades player, then you go and become a Hades player. And if you are a Hades player but you've kind of given up at some point, that this inspires you again to try to be the best Hades players that you can be. I know doing the same loop may not be the thing for everybody, but I don't know, I'm having such a good time grinding this game and improving my skills with various weapons and hitting the high heats. And I don't know, maybe you'll have fun doing that too. And now you have a guide of kind of how to set your own progression, right? They gave the Pact of Punishment is really a great tool to like choose your own adventure in the end game. I really love the design. All right, until the next video, then. This is ADWCTA signing out, and hopefully see you in the next video or on the stream. Bye, guys.